Okay, folks, so we're just going to continue on then with just touching on a third theory called the bid rent theory. Okay, and again, this is very, very simple. We won't spend long on it at all. It shows three lines. A is retailing and shopping, B is industry, and C is housing. Excuse me. Okay, so the cost of the rent, the cost of buildings, okay, this is the CBD, this is the central business district. Then this is the distance, we're going further away, okay, from the center. So you will notice the most dramatic changes for retail and offices and commercial, okay. The rent is huge in the CBD, okay, but they cannot afford to be far from the center. That won't work. If you open a store over here, you won't have enough people to keep going, so you'll close down. So they have to be here. They can't go too much further, but the rents are high. Industry is a bit more wiggle room, okay. Still, the CBD, if you look at the B line, in the CBD their costs are the highest, but they have a bit more space where they can work a bit further away from the very center. And then residential, again, residents can be further away, especially because of public transport now, all right. But as you move closer to the CBD, well, sorry, the CBD here in particular is the most expensive rent, okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to look at a little sheet about bid rent theory, and then we will go back to New Wider World, page 44, all right. But first of all, I just want to run through, I attached this with the outline sent on Sunday as well. It says land use models. You'll notice there's some information about Burgess and Hoyt down there, okay. But we're just going to look at the bid rent theory. Again, you've got very similar graph here. Okay, you got your commercial, offices and retail, industry, industrial and residential, all right. Pretty much this is pretty simple, okay. It's the value of the land for different purposes, such as commercial, manufacturing, residential, okay. A little note to make is land at the centre of the city is most expensive for two main reasons. It is the most accessible land to public transport, so everybody can get there, and there's only a small amount available. So that sentence you need to make a note. You can make this a subheading, and then that little sentence there, okay. Now, land prices generally decrease away from the central area, although there are secondary peaks at different areas as you move out of the city, okay. But we've got this little diagram here, all right. If we were to try and make kind of a mountain out of the cost of land, CBD would be at the top, and then it drops off dramatically as you move away. So we're moving away from the CBD. Every now and again you'll come across a little area where costs spike, okay. That could be an area where there's very nice housing or a certain amount of employment where people want to live, okay. Or this could be an area of very good entertainment where people want to live, so demand goes up. When demand goes up, cost goes up, okay. But generally the land decreases in cost as you move away from the CBD. That's all we're saying, all right. We're going to jump on to page 44, New Wider World. Pen and highlighter at the ready, please. All right, so page 44, okay. Let's go through each section very quickly. CBD, Central Business District, all right. So because most rail and road routes meet there, okay, it's easily reached by people living throughout the urban and rural areas. So again, this is the hub of everything, all right. Remember, it has most train stations, bus stations, stuff like that. Airport, well, the airports are usually outside the city. Okay, so originally, all right, people competed with each other to locate here. Okay, competition together with limited amount of space that was available pushed up land values. Okay, hugely expensive to rent there. Like I said, to try and rent in London or New York will cost you millions. The major land users in the CBD are shops, banks and offices. Okay, high-rise buildings, shops, banks, offices. That's what's mainly there, the main land use and function. Only they can afford the high rent of cost, or the high cost of rent, okay. Large corporations, it's very expensive for an individual to cover the cost there. Shops tend to be large department stores and specialist shops which had a high turnover. So again, when you go in there, you see all your Gucci's and I don't even know many brands. So, but all the big brands will be in there. Now, again, remember that change over time. In time, CBDs became increasingly congested with pedestrians and traffic. Most central business districts now, if you look at a lot of modern big cities, they've tried to pedestrianize or like change. They don't let cars in there very much because it takes up too much space. Okay, there's too much pollution. This reduced their accessibility and as well as their attractiveness as a place to enter or to either shop or work. So CBDs actually start to get very polluted, and it was terrible trying to drive through them. Okay, for a period when I lived in London, I had to drive through the city centre every morning and it took hours. So these are negatives of the CBD. this last bit, all right? And I've added businesses moved to the edge of cities, all right, for cheaper costs and better transport. So now what you find is these kind of hubs outside the city, all right, and out near the suburbs, where you'll have what we call industrial parks or big shopping parks, and they're located there. They've got more space for their stores, they've got more space for parking, they've got less congestion, less traffic, and it's cheaper land. Okay, let's keep moving. The next part of our diagram then was the inner cities. Okay, most inner city areas developed along with industry in the 19th century, so this is going back 200 years. As industry grew, so did the demand for workers. So industry set up somewhere, they established at a place, they needed workers, so workers came in and lived right next to the industry. Back in the 19th century there was no cars, no public transport, so people had to live there. They moved from the rural areas to be in towns for work, okay, and they needed low-cost houses. So what happened is, if you look at this picture over here, this is the terraced housing, very small, maybe 1-2 bedroom housing, row upon row upon row upon row upon row of that would have been established for workers in these factories, all right? People also wanted to live as close as possible to their place of work, very simple. Many of the early advantages of living and working in the inner city have now become disadvantages, so there's no real advantage to living in these types of places anymore. The houses, okay, so these are all negatives of the inner city areas and what they're kind of been left like today. So houses were built as close together as possible, very high density. Okay, these people lived on top of each other essentially. All right, few amenities. Okay, so were provided. All right, so no indoor toilets or bathrooms, running water, electricity would have been very rare. Stuff like this. No open spaces for recreation. All right, so the lack of sanitation of sewage and toilets and stuff and showers, closeness of people, and the smoke from nearby factories, they're all things that were very, very bad about living here. So what happened then is, as soon as people got the money, they would move away from the centre, okay, especially if they could afford a car or something to drive in and out of work, and that's how the city then started to grow. All right, on to page 45. Okay, so to continue on then, attempts have been made to improve these living conditions. Okay, they knocked down or bulldoze those areas and building high-rise flats. So they tried to change it to make these new flats for people. Didn't really work. Okay, think about our urban renewal word that we looked at earlier. So they tried to improve existing properties, urban renewal. Now high-rise flats, despite having modern amenities, so they had bathrooms and electricity and running water, all right, they still led to poverty, crime and unemployment. All right, so there was because there was even more flats now, more and more people moved in to compete for these jobs. All right, when they couldn't get them, crime started to grow. All right, so it's not always easy just by thinking you can make a simple change. All right, so industry then, what happened to industry? Okay, inner cities were characterized by large factories. So again, like we said, we had the inner city with the large factory and all the poor little housing around it for the workers. They're located on available land wherever there was enough space. Okay, they needed, again, I put what industry needs to be a success. So they needed available land, canals, railways, whatever they could transport their materials. Beside rivers as well, a source of power from hydroelectricity and disposing waste. They used to just pump all their chemicals out there. Right, and again, they needed to be next to land that could house lots of workers. So that's how our cities developed. It all started with industry, and then the people flocked there. Now, in recent times, many have been forced to close. Okay, there's a lack of space for expansion. So they've opened their factory, but then put loads of buildings right around it. So there's no room to expand. Okay, we had congested roads, lots of pollution and stuff like that. Right, many of them now. So what they've done is either these old factories have closed down because there's been a change of employment. People don't work there anymore. They've got new jobs. Or else the factory has closed down and moved out to the edge of the cities where there's more space. So a lot have been left empty, while others have been pulled down to leave large areas of derelict, disgusting land called brownfield sites. We'll look at that in the next video in just a moment. Okay, so industry was at the center, the focal point, okay, of cities, but now not so much. All right, and then our last bit on this bit here, other types of land use. Okay, inner cities also contain transport. There's always a demand for transport. Transport makes people move and industry work. Okay, so there was always a demand for railways, canals, roads leading in and out of the CBD and to and from the factories. All right, so that's another land use demand. Open space was extremely limited until recently, okay, partly because land near the CBD was too expensive to leave unused, and partly because few people had, due to long working hours, spare time. Now, you need to make this note, right? This has changed dramatically. Most cities now have lots of open space. Workers have more free time than ever to use green spaces, and so demand has risen. There's actually quite a lot of data and evidence now that says living near green spaces makes people happier and healthier, and then they work harder. So a lot of cities now will have huge amounts of parklands and wetlands and national parks and stuff protected against building. Okay.